When you hear the words Garden of Eden, what immediately comes to your mind? For most of us, an image instantly flashes in our heads. It usually involves a magical forest, two naked people hiding behind a bush, a talking snake wrapped around a tree, and a shiny red apple. If you grew up around church or even just absorbed Western culture, you were probably handed this story as a child. It was presented as a simple moral fable about why you shouldn't break the rules. Disobey, and God will kick you out of the garden and lock the gate forever. As children, we accepted it. But as we grew older, the story started to feel small. It felt like a myth or a fairy tale. And for many people, the confusion around these opening pages of Genesis is exactly where they close the book and walk away. It just doesn't seem to fit the complex, beautiful, and often tragic reality of the world we actually live in. But what if I told you that you have been looking at Eden through the wrong lens? What if the Garden of Eden was never meant to be read as just a historical map coordinate or a primitive fairy tale about a magical fruit? What if, instead, Eden is the architectural blueprint for the entire universe? What if it is a hidden pattern, a specific design of reality that repeats everywhere, from the first page of Genesis to the final page of Revelation? Today, we are going to completely deconstruct the childhood myths. We are putting away the Sunday school felt boards. We are going to look at this ancient text with fresh, mature eyes. No fear, no religious jargon, just clarity. No confusion. Let's connect the dots. In this video, we are going to explore what the Garden of Eden actually was to the ancient people who first heard this story. We are going to uncover the profound hidden pattern established in Genesis chapters 1 and 2. Once you see this pattern, you will never read the Bible the same way again. It will suddenly make sense of the strange ancient tabernacles, the massive golden temples in Jerusalem, the shocking life and death of Jesus, and the beautiful, ultimate vision of the new creation at the very end of time. You will see that the Bible is not a random collection of disconnected, confusing rules. It is one single, brilliant, unified narrative from start to finish. And more importantly, we are going to see why this matters today. Because discovering what was lost in Eden is the absolute key to understanding who you are, what your purpose is, and where human history is actually headed. Here is what the text actually says, in plain English. To understand Eden, we have to perform a massive perspective shift. We have to take off our 21st century, modern, scientific glasses. And we have to put on the glasses of an ancient Middle Eastern person living thousands of years ago. In the ancient Near East, how did people think about the gods? They believed the gods lived in a completely different dimension, the heavenly realm. Humans lived down here, in the earthly realm. These were two separate, distinct spaces. But the ancients believed there were specific, sacred locations where these two dimensions overlapped. Places where heaven and earth locked together, where the divine space crashed right into the human space. And what did they call those overlapping spaces? They called them temples. A temple wasn't just a church building where you went to sing songs for an hour on a Sunday. A temple was the control room of the universe. It was the literal dwelling place of the divine on earth. It was where the life, power, and order of heaven flowed down into the dirt and chaos of humanity. And this is the ultimate truth moment you need to grasp if you want to understand the Bible. The author of Genesis is not describing a public park or a botanical garden. He is describing a cosmic temple. Eden is the first sanctuary. It is the place where God's space and human space are perfectly united. Let's look closely at the architecture of this temple. Notice the physical details the writer of Genesis gives us. We are told that a river flows out of Eden to water the garden, and from there, it divides into 4 headwaters to water the rest of the earth. Think about gravity. For water to flow out and divide to the rest of the world, Eden has to be elevated. It is high up. In ancient literature, the dwelling place of God is almost always on a high mountain. Eden is the original holy mountain. Now look at the materials mentioned in the text. Genesis chapter 2 specifically pauses to tell us that the land surrounding Eden contains gold, aromatic, resin, and precious onyx stones. Why does the author care about geology? Why mention gold and onyx? Because later in the Bible, when the Israelites build the tabernacle and the temple in Jerusalem, what materials do they use? Gold, incense, and precious onyx stones. The writer is planting a massive neon sign in the text, telling the ancient reader, this is a sanctuary. This is holy ground, and at the very center of this sanctuary, at the peak of the mountain, is the source of all existence, the tree of life. This tree represents the unfiltered, raw, burning presence of the Creator. It is life itself. So if Eden is a cosmic temple, what does that make Adam and Eve? We usually think of them as the first farmers or maybe park rangers whose only job was to prune the bushes and name the animals. But the Hebrew words used to describe their job reveal something much deeper. God places the human in the garden to work it and take care of it. In Hebrew, those words are abad and shamar. Do you know where else those two specific Hebrew words are used together in the Bible? They are used in the book of Numbers to describe the exact duties of the priests working inside the holy temple. Adam and Eve are not just gardeners. They are the royal priests of the Eden sanctuary. They are the image bearers. Their job is to stand at the intersection of heaven and earth, representing God to the world and representing the world to God. They are designed for partnership. God's instruction to subdue the earth wasn't a command to exploit or destroy the planet. It was a command to take the wild, untamed chaos outside the garden and use their creativity, their art, and their work to expand the borders of Eden. The goal was for the entire world to eventually become a sanctuary. The goal was for the order, beauty, and life of the garden to spread until the whole earth was a place where God and humanity lived together in perfect harmony. That was the original pattern. That was the blueprint. Everything was designed for intimate connection. No masks, no shame, no fear. Just naked, vulnerable, beautiful truth in the presence of the Creator. But there is a tension built into the design of this sanctuary. Because real love and real partnership require a genuine choice. You cannot force someone to love you. And right there, in the middle of the temple, stands another tree. A tree that represents the right to define good and evil on your own terms. A choice that threatens to fracture the very fabric of reality, tear heaven and earth apart, and shatter the pattern completely. So here we are in the cosmic temple, the overlapping space between heaven and earth. And right in the center, God places a boundary, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God tells the humans, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. Now pause for a truth moment. For centuries, we have treated this like a bizarre, arbitrary test, like God put a shiny red button in a room and said, whatever you do, don't press it just to see if we would fail. But that is entirely missing the point. To know good and evil in the ancient world wasn't about intellectual intelligence. It was a Hebrew idiom for claiming absolute authority. It meant taking the power to define what is right and what is wrong on your own terms, without referencing the Creator. The tree represents absolute, independent autonomy. God is essentially saying, I have given you everything. We are partners, but trust my wisdom. If you seize the authority to define reality for yourself, it will fracture the universe. It will sever your connection to the source of life. And the result will be death. Enter the serpent. Forget the cartoon snake in an apple tree. In the ancient Near Eastern context, this creature is a spiritual rebel, a deceptive, chaotic entity that wants to tear the sanctuary apart. And look at the lie the serpent tells. He doesn't just say the fruit tastes good. He attacks the character of God. He says you will not certainly die. God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. The lie is this: God is holding out on you. God is a tyrant keeping you small. If you want to be truly free, you have to seize power for yourself. You have to be your own God, and humanity takes the bait. They reach out, they take the fruit, and they eat. And in that exact second, the cosmic temple is defiled. The perfect overlap between heaven and earth is violently torn apart. The immediate result isn't a lightning bolt from the sky. The immediate result is shame. For the first time in human history, they look at each other, realize they are naked, and they feel deeply unsafe. What is the very first thing humanity does after the rebellion? They sew fig leaves together. They hide. They put on masks. They can no longer handle the unshielded, burning truth of God's presence, and they can no longer be truly vulnerable with each other. The intimacy is broken. God comes walking in the garden, and he asks a haunting question. Where are you? It's not that God lost them on a map. He is asking a relational question. Look at how far you have drifted. Look at the damage you've done. Because of their choice to define good and evil on their own terms, humanity can no longer remain in the Holy of Holies. They are exiled from the garden. But I want you to look closely at this exile because this completely changes how we view the biblical God. The exile from Eden was not a sadistic punishment. It was a severe mercy. It was love with teeth. Think about it. If humanity, now corrupted by selfishness, violence, and shame, had been allowed to stay in the garden and eat from the tree of life, they would have become immortal monsters. Evil would have been eternalized. God exiles them to protect them from living forever in a broken, dying state. They are sent eastward. In the biblical narrative, moving east becomes a recurring literary motif. Moving east means moving away from the presence of God. It means wandering into the chaotic, dusty, violent world outside the sanctuary. And to ensure they don't wander back in and destroy themselves, God places cherubim, terrifying, majestic spiritual beings, at the entrance of the garden, wielding a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. The door is locked. The intersection of heaven and earth is closed. Outside the garden, things degenerate rapidly. In the very next chapter, a brother murders a brother. Violence spreads like a virus. The human race, desperate for the connection they lost, starts trying to build their own Edens on their own terms. This culminates in the famous story of the Tower of Babel. Humanity gathers and says, "Let us build a city, with a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we may make a name for ourselves." The Tower of Babel was a ziggurat, ancient, man-made, artificial holy mountain. It is humanity saying, we don't need God's temple. We will build our own temple. We will force heaven and earth back together using our own strength, our own technology, and our own power. But Babylon is the exact opposite of Eden. Eden was a place where God humbly came down to dwell with humanity in love. Babylon is a place where arrogant humans build upward to try and overthrow God and dominate others. The pattern is clear. Whenever humans try to build a paradise using the tools of the beast's power, control, and exploitation, it always results in chaos and confusion. If you are tracking with this tension, and you see how our modern world is still trying to build Babylons today, drop into the comments right now and type, "I feel the tension," because this ancient story is actually the story of the modern world. So, is the pattern lost forever? Did God just abandon the project of heaven and earth being united? Not a chance. Fast forward in the biblical story. God calls a man named Abraham. From Abraham comes the nation of Israel. God rescues them from slavery in Egypt, leads them to the base of Mount Sinai, and gives them a very specific set of architectural blueprints. He tells them to build a tabernacle, a massive, elaborate, portable tent where God's presence will travel with them through the desert. But if you read the instructions for the tabernacle in the book of Exodus, you start to realize something mind-blowing. The tabernacle is designed to look exactly like the Garden of Eden. What was the entrance to Eden? It faced the east. The entrance to the tabernacle faces the exact same direction, What guarded the entrance to Eden? Cherubim. What is woven into the heavy curtains of the tabernacle? Giant images of cherubim. When the high priest walks into the tabernacle, he passes a massive golden lampstand called the menorah. Do you know what the menorah was? It was stylized to look like a tree with branches, buds, and almond blossoms burning with fire. It is a brilliant, glowing symbol of the tree of life and the high priest himself. He is dressed in garments made of gold and precious onyxed stones, the exact same materials found in Eden. His job is to work and keep the sanctuary using the exact same Hebrew words used for Adam. God hasn't given up. The tabernacle is a mini Eden. It is a portable sanctuary. It is a tiny, highly restricted pocket of space where heaven and earth overlap once again in the middle of a broken world. But there is a massive problem. Because of human corruption, the presence of God is so pure and so intense that it is dangerous. The Holy of Holies has to be separated by a thick, heavy veil. The pattern is back, but the access is strictly limited. The true restoration hasn't happened yet. The portable tabernacle carries the presence of God through the wilderness for generations. But eventually, the nation of Israel settles in the land, and King Solomon decides it is time to upgrade. He replaces the portable tent with a massive, permanent structure in Jerusalem. If you thought the tabernacle was a subtle nod to Eden, Solomon's temple is a massive neon billboard. Read the architectural descriptions in the book of 1 Kings. The interior of the temple is lined entirely with cedar, wood, and what is carved into the wood: gourds, open flowers, palm trees, and pomegranates. It is a stone and wood forest. It is an architectural garden. Giant cherubim made of olive wood and overlaid with gold stand guard in the inner sanctuary. The menorah, the stylized tree of fire, stands burning constantly. The heavy smell of incense fills the air, creating a sensory experience of standing on the peak of a holy mountain. The Jerusalem Temple is Eden 2.0. It is the geographic center of the biblical universe, the specific coordinate where heaven and earth are bolted together. But here is the tragic reality. The problem of human corruption hasn't been solved. The access to the tree of life is still blocked. The massive, heavy curtain, the veil, still separates the Holy of Holies from the rest of the world. The high priest can only enter that sacred space once a year, and he has to carry the blood of a sacrifice to temporarily cleanse the space from the pollution of human evil. The pattern is beautiful, but the barrier remains. And then history repeats itself. Israel was called to be a kingdom of priests. They were supposed to be the new Adam and Eve, representing God to the surrounding nations and expanding the borders of this sanctuary. But they do the exact same thing Adam and Eve did. They want to define good and evil on their own terms. Instead of trusting God's wisdom, the kings of Israel build corrupt political alliances with violent empires. They participate in the exact same greed and exploitation as the nations around them. The prophets scream warnings at them, telling them that they are crushing the poor, neglecting the vulnerable, and wearing religious masks while their hearts are completely compromised. Remember, biblical warning language is love with teeth. The prophets are trying to wake them up so they don't destroy themselves, but the nation refuses to listen. They embrace the way of the beast. They build their own Babylon. And so, the severe mercy of exile happens all over again. In 586 BC, the Babylonian Empire surrounds Jerusalem. The city is starved, the walls are breached, and the beautiful golden Eden temple is burned to the ground. It is reduced to smoldering ash. The people are marched eastward in chains, away from the presence of God, into the dark heart of Babylon. Imagine the profound theological trauma of this moment. The sanctuary is gone. The overlap between heaven and earth has been smashed into a million pieces. The universe feels fragmented, chaotic, and empty. It looks like the empire of death has won, and the pattern of Eden is lost forever. But right there, in the darkest, most hopeless moment of the Babylonian exile, A prophet named Ezekiel receives an apocalypsis, a vision that pulls back the curtain. Ezekiel is a priest without a temple, sitting by a muddy river in Babylon. God takes him in a vision to a high mountain, and he shows him a brand new temple, a restored sanctuary. But as Ezekiel is taking a tour of this visionary temple, he notices a tiny, mind-blowing detail. In Ezekiel chapter 47, he sees a small stream of water trickling out from under the threshold of the temple doors. He follows the water. As it flows eastward out of the temple, it becomes a stream. Then it becomes a river. Then it becomes a massive, uncrossable torrent of rushing water. And where is it flowing? It is flowing down into the Araboth, the harshest, driest, most dead desert in the region, heading straight for the Dead Sea, a body of water so toxic with salt that nothing can survive in it. But Ezekiel sees that wherever this river from the temple flows, everything lives. Swarms of fish appear in the Dead Sea, and on the banks of this river, on both sides, fruit trees are growing. Trees whose leaves never wither and whose fruit never fails. Trees that provide food and healing. Do you see what is happening? Let's connect the dots. This is the River of Eden. These are the trees of life. God is promising that he is not giving up on the blueprint. But the future pattern won't just be a static building where humanity goes to visit God. The future temple will generate a river of life that flows out into the darkest, most toxic, dead places of the world, and it will heal them. The goal isn't just to rebuild a religious building. The goal is a healed reality. God setting things right. For hundreds of years after Ezekiel, the Jewish people wait. They return from exile and build a modest second temple, but the burning glory of God doesn't fill it. The river doesn't flow. The religious leaders become corrupt. It's a hollow shell. Heaven and earth remain torn apart. Then, out of nowhere, the Gospel of John opens, and it begins with 3 very specific words. In the beginning. John is deliberately dragging your mind all the way back to Genesis chapter 1. He is telling you, pay attention. The original blueprint is about to be rebooted. A new creation is starting. John introduces us to Jesus, but he uses a very specific, explosive phrase to describe him. He writes, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us." But in the original Greek, the word for made his dwelling is skanu. It literally translates to, he pitched his tent, or he tabernacled among us. Let that sink in for a truth moment. Jesus is not just a moral teacher. He is not just a political revolutionary. Jesus is the walking tabernacle. He is the ultimate living temple. The overlap between heaven and earth is no longer a building made of stone and gold in Jerusalem. The overlap between the divine space and the human space is a person. It is a first-century carpenter covered in the dust of the road. Wherever Jesus goes, the presence of God goes. When he touches a leper, the leper isn't made unclean. The leper is healed. When he speaks to the marginalized, their dignity is restored. When he confronts the hypocritical religious leaders, he is tearing down their masks. He is the river of life flowing out into the dead, toxic places of human history, bringing absolute healing and truth. He is doing exactly what Ezekiel predicted. But the empire of death and the religious leaders whose power is threatened by this new temple cannot let this stand. They cannot handle the unshielded truth of God walking among them. And so they decide they have to tear this temple down. Throughout his life, Jesus is constantly challenging the corrupt religious system in Jerusalem. And at one point, he stands right in the shadow of the massive stoned temple, looks at the leaders, and says something that sounds like absolute madness. He says, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." The leaders are furious. They say it has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days. But the writer of the gospel immediately drops a note for the reader. But the temple he had spoken of was his body. Do you see the profound shift? The stone building in Jerusalem is becoming obsolete. The true intersection of heaven and earth, the true sanctuary, is standing right in front of them in human skin. But the empires of this world, both the religious empire of Jerusalem and the political empire of Rome, cannot tolerate this. They collude to execute the author of life. The crucifixion is the ultimate collision between the kingdom of God and the empire of death. It is humanity, once again, reaching out to seize authority, violently trying to eliminate the true king. They tear the human temple down. But right at the moment Jesus breathes his last breath, the Gospel of Matthew records a detail that should send shivers down your spine. The massive, heavy curtain inside the Jerusalem temple, the veil woven with images of cherubim that separated humanity from the Holy of Holies, is violently torn in two, from top to bottom. The barrier is broken. The flaming sword of the cherubim has been extinguished by the blood of the ultimate sacrifice. The access to the tree of life is finally, permanently ripped wide open. But the story doesn't end in death, because the biblical story always climaxes in God's victory over death and evil, not in defeat. The Gospel of John includes a beautiful, highly specific geographical detail about where Jesus was buried. John writes, "At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, a garden." We are back in Eden. On Sunday morning, Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb while it is still dark. She finds the stone rolled away. She is weeping. Then she turns around and sees a man standing there. John writes this incredible sentence. Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him." For centuries, people have read this as just a simple case of mistaken identity. Mary's eyes were blurry from crying. But John is a literary genius, and he is doing something breathtaking here under the surface. It wasn't a mistake. Jesus is the gardener. Jesus is the new Adam. He is the ultimate royal priest standing in the middle of a new garden. Where the first Adam failed, seized power, and brought death, the second Adam surrendered power, laid down his life, and defeated death from the inside out. The resurrection of Jesus is not just a cool magic trick to prove he was God. The resurrection is the literal beginning of the new creation. It is the rebooting of the Eden pattern. It is the first piece of the physical universe being fully and permanently healed from the disease of death. Later that exact same day, the resurrected Jesus appears to his disciples. They are hiding in a locked room, terrified. And what does he do? He breathes on them and says, "Receive the Holy Spirit. Let's put on our ancient glasses again." Go all the way back to Genesis chapter 2. How did God bring the first humans to life in the dirt of Eden? He breathed the breath of life into them. Jesus is recreating humanity. He is breathing the life of the new creation into his followers. And a few weeks later, at the festival of Pentecost, something explosive happens. The Holy Spirit, the raw, unfiltered presence of God, comes rushing into the room where the disciples are gathered. And how does the text describe the visual appearance of the Spirit? As tongues of fire separating and coming to rest on each of their heads. Where have we seen the fire of God before? In the burning bush, in the pillar of fire in the wilderness, on the menorah, in the tabernacle, hovering over the Holy of Holies. But now the fire isn't resting on a stone building, it is resting on people. This completely shatters the religious paradigms of the ancient world. Later in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul writes a letter to the early Christians, and he drops a massive theological bomb. He asks them, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit?" The Apostle Peter takes it even further. He calls the early Christians living stones who are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood. Do you see the hidden pattern? Do you see how the architecture of reality has shifted? The overlap between heaven and earth has been decentralized. It has been democratized. The temple is no longer a building in the Middle East that you have to take a pilgrimage to visit. If you are a follower of Jesus, carrying the Spirit of God, you are the temple. You are a walking, breathing, miniature Eden. Pause here for an honest reading of your own life. This isn't just religious poetry. This is an absolute redefinition of human purpose. If you are tracking with this massive shift, and you see how the Bible is actually one brilliant, unified story from start to finish, drop into the comments right now and type, "I'm rebuilding my faith" on the text. I read every single one. Think about it. What was the original mandate given to humanity in the first Eden? To be royal priests, to subdue the earth, and to spread the borders of the garden until the whole world was filled with the presence of God. What is the final mandate Jesus gives to his followers before he ascends? Go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. It is the exact same mandate. The mission of the church is to be the river of life from Ezekiel's vision, flowing out of the temple straight into the dead, toxic, and broken places of human history. Your job, in your office, in your home, in your neighborhood, is to create pockets of Eden, places where truth wins, where love is not naive, where justice isn't optional, and where people are healed. The kingdom of God is not just a distant idea. It is a coming reality that we are invited to participate in right now on a Tuesday afternoon. But the story isn't over yet. The pattern hasn't reached its ultimate climax, because the world is still deeply broken and the empire of death is still fighting back. To understand how this entire cosmic drama resolves, we need to look at the last page of the book. We need to go to Revelation. To see how this entire cosmic drama resolves, we have to flip to the very last pages of the Bible. We have to look at the book of Revelation. For a lot of people, Revelation is a terrifying book of bizarre imagery, dragons, and cosmic destruction. But if you read it through the lens of the pattern we have just traced, the pattern of the Eden sanctuary, the entire book suddenly clicks into place. No confusion, just breathtaking clarity. The Apostle John is exiled on the island of Patmos. He is given an apocalypse set pulling back of the curtain. He is shown the ultimate end of the human story. And what does he see? Does he see humanity finally escaping this dirty, broken planet and flying away into the clouds to play harps forever? Not at all. John writes, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away." The biblical story does not end with an evacuation plan. It ends with a restoration plan. God does not abandon the physical universe. He created in Genesis chapter 1. He heals it. He purifies it. John looks up and he sees the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. Heaven comes down to earth. The two dimensions, torn apart by human rebellion thousands of years ago, are finally and permanently stitched back together. The overlap is complete. As John describes the architecture of this New Jerusalem descending to earth, he gives us a massive mind-bending detail. In Revelation 21, he describes the dimensions of the city. He says it is laid out like a square, as long as it is wide and as high as it is long. It is a perfect cube. To a modern reader, a giant cube-shaped city sounds like a bizarre science fiction movie. But to an ancient reader who knew their Bible, it was a massive neon sign. Do you know the only other thing in the entire Bible that is shaped like a perfect cube? The Holy of Holies. The innermost room of the tabernacle and the temple. The specific restricted space where the unfiltered presence of God lived. John is telling us that the entire new creation has become the Holy of Holies. The veil is completely gone. There are no more barriers. And then John says something that would have shocked his first-century Jewish readers to their core. He writes, "I did not see a temple in the city. How can the ultimate holy city not have a temple?" John immediately gives the answer, "Because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. You don't need a building to overlap heaven and earth when the Creator himself has made his permanent dwelling place directly among humanity. The entire cosmos has become the sanctuary. The blueprint is finally realized. And what is at the very center of this massive cosmic city? Let's connect the dots from start to finish. In Revelation chapter 22, John sees a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, flowing right from the throne of God, and standing on each side of the river is the tree of life. We are back in Eden. The story has come full circle. But notice the brilliant progression of the biblical narrative. It started in a garden, but it ends in a garden city. A garden represents raw, uncultivated nature, but a city represents human culture, architecture, relationships, art, and community. God didn't erase thousands of years of human history. The kings of the earth bring their splendor into the city. All the good, true, and beautiful things humanity has created are purified and brought into God's eternal kingdom. And the leaves of the tree of life? The text explicitly says they are for the healing of the nations. This is the ultimate truth moment. God's final word is not destruction. It is profound, absolute healing. God sets things right. He leans in and personally wipes every tear from every eye. The trauma of human history is validated, and then it is healed. Everything sad finally comes untrue. So why does all of this matter today? Why does it matter that the Bible is a single, unified story about a cosmic temple? It matters because it completely changes how you view your life right now. If the goal of Christianity is just to go to heaven when you die, then this physical world doesn't really matter. Your body doesn't matter. The environment doesn't matter. Justice for the oppressed doesn't matter. You're just waiting in a cosmic waiting room for the rescue helicopter. But if the goal of the biblical story is heaven coming down to earth, if the goal is new creation, then everything matters. If you are tracking with this massive shift in perspective, I want to hear from you. Drop into the comments right now and type renewal, not escape. Let me know you are seeing the pattern. When you understand the Eden pattern, you realize you are not just a random accident wandering through a chaotic universe. If you follow the Jesus of the Bible, you are a walking, breathing sanctuary. You are a royal priest. Your job on a Tuesday morning at the office, or when you are caring for a sick relative, or when you are fighting against corruption in your community, is to plant pockets of Eden. Your job is to bring the order, truth, and love of heaven into the dust and chaos of the present moment. The Bible is not a collection of disconnected religious rules meant to make you feel guilty. It is a brilliant, beautiful, connected narrative from Genesis to Revelation. It is the story of a God who loves his creation so much that he refuses to let death have the final word. If you have been burned by hype, panic, or religious pressure, and you are trying to piece your faith back together using just the text, you are in the right place. Drop into the comments and type, "I'm rebuilding my faith on the text. I read every single one." Next time, we are going to dive even deeper into this. We are going to explore the most misunderstood concept in the entire Bible, the biblical reality of judgment, and why it is actually the most profound good news for the oppressed. If you want to keep exploring the Bible slowly, safely, and honestly, without the heavy religious baggage, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching. Keep asking questions, keep looking for the pattern, and let's keep connecting the dots. I'll see you in the next one.